I should warn you, we are going to come to show and tell. But first, I'm going to do what I think is the fiddliest part of this. I don't, you know, there's some bits of knitting that are fiddly. It's like sewing. I don't sew very much because I find there are a lot of elements of sewing that are fiddly, whereas in knitting there are a lot fewer. However, I do find this sewing or this knitting together of the two edges a bit fiddly. Now, if you were here the first night, you'll remember that for my bottom edge, when I do the provisional cast on, I use the cable from the interchangeable needles here. And these purple plastic things are just the ends that you can put on to stop the stitches coming off. So these are my provisional stitches here in the lining yarn that I cast on with. So what I first of all need to do is I need to put a needle end on one of those so that I can knit off it. So I've got my needle ends here. It's actually good if you can get one that's smaller than the needle that you're knitting with, because the stitches come off more easily. So I'm only going to put one on. I don't need to put two on. I only need to put the one I'm knitting off on. And there's a wee funny tool. I don't know if any of you have these, but there's a wee sort of pin that goes into a hole in the cable so that you can hold it steady, twist off the end and put on your needle end. And you can see this is actually a short needle end. How long it is? No, but you get two different lengths in these, and I find the longer ones are a bit cumbersome for this job, so I actually specifically bought these short ones. So then I'm going to, I have, first of all, I have sewed in the ends where I changed from a lining yarn to my two colors, my pink and my purple. I've sewn all three of those in, and you can maybe just see the wee ends poking out there. So I haven't sewn them in particularly neatly, but I don't need to, because we're going to double this over now and you won't be able to see them. So I'm folding, keeping the bit where I'm knitting towards me. Has anybody seen these things before, by the way?
No.
No.
So this is a stopper
Oh, yeah.
for the end of your circulars, or I guess if you were using double pointed needles as well. Now, I have three of these. See, there's holes in the end there. There's bigger ones and there's littler ones. I have no idea where I got these, and I have three of them, and I can only assume they are something that is maybe obsolete, but I have acquired quite a lot of knitting stuff from older ladies who've actually died, and their relations have given it to me because they know I'm interested in knitting, and that is the only place I can think I got these from, and the only explanation why I've got three of them and I've never bought one. So, but they are useful, very useful, because this is a point at which you really don't want your knitting coming off the needles. So I'm pulling my my inside. I'll try and keep this on camera, but it is a bit fiddly. I'm pulling my inside so that the needle I've just put on, and I've possibly put it on the wrong edge because I quite often do. Yeah, I have. That's what happens when I don't do it before I fold it. Okay, so I actually need to put another needle end on because I put it on the wrong end. Bear with me. In fact, I'll just swap them around. I'll take this one off. I'm going to just angle this down so you can see the knitting instead of me. So I'll put that end back on because that definitely won't come off then. the other one off. Does anybody have these interchangeable needles?
Yes, I've got some.
They're really useful, aren't they?
Yeah.
It's great for like when you have to change needles, if you're like doing a rib or and then moving to a bigger needle. I just find them, and it also means that you always have the length and the dimension of needle that you need. Right, here we go. I've got it right this time. So I've got I started with a purple, and so when I pick up my other edge, it's natural for that to be in purple. So I did effectively make this decision just at the end of my lining when I did the plain row in the purple, but it could just as easily have been the pink. I think one of the nice things about these headbands is that you have these little choices that you can make. Like, well, that stitch. So now I've got my two needles lined up in parallel to each other. The back one has got my lining, provisional cast on stitches on it, and the front one has got my chart stitches on it. Stop bashing the camera. This first stitch is always really tight, and it's a bit of a nuisance to get off, not the front one, but the back one. And sometimes I get so fed up with it that I actually just slide it off the needle and pick it up again. But if you slide it right to the end, you can normally get it off, she says, completely clearly, on the thin end of the needle. Take it off first and then bring it through the front one. Now, you've got two choices here, and it's really personal preference. You notice that every second stitch, and it's just the way the provisional cast on is, every second stitch looks like it wants to be knitted into the back. And so I do. So that one goes in the back, and the next one I knit into the front. So that one goes in the back, and the next one I knit into the front. It's always the front of the front stitches, but I alternate the back and the front of the back stitches. And this, as I said at the beginning, I always find this quite fiddly, and I have to concentrate to make sure that I am getting every stitch. So it's not something you can really take your eyes off. But the fortunate thing is that your stitches on your front needle are alternating colors. So if you keep an eye on your alternating colors, make sure you've just got one purple, one pink each time. And I'm just going to turn this over so that you can see what happens when you do it alternating. Can you see on the back there, I've got one pink, one purple, one pink, one purple, one pink showing at the back. And again, it doesn't matter because that's on the inside and nobody's ever going to see it. But if I knitted all of the lining stitches into the front, then I wouldn't have that alternating pink and purple. I would just see purple stitches at the back. So while I am knitting round this, and I'll try and keep it on the camera while I'm doing it, I would love to hear how everybody else is getting on. If you had not finished last time, have you finished now? Have you got stuck somewhere? Have you knitted one and started on another? Are you like Annette on your 7th or 8th now, probably?
No, only 5th.
Only 5th.
Yeah, I've given 2 away, so I've only got 2 here and the one. I haven't finished this 5th one. I thought I'd wait and see how you do your iCord.
Okay.
And then I'd have a go at that.
Well, I'll show you that in a little while. Which one are you going to keep for yourself? Which colour?
I've got a sort of raspberry and see where the camera is. It's sort of a green, but it doesn't show up very well.
Like a mint?
Yeah. So I've got that one, and then I've got a turquoise pink.
Oh yeah, I like.
So, I've got those 2.
Yeah, they're lovely.
And then the one I'm making at the moment is also turquoise, but it's darker, or teal, you might call it, a teal colour, and the rest of the pink that I had left over, and I'm giving that one away.
And what wool are you using?
They're Jameson and Smith's, all of them actually. Yes.
That pink looks very similar to the one that I have here, which is lipstick, I believe.
I don't know what the names are. I've only got the codes. They don't put the names on the ball band, just the codes, which is a shame.
Jameson's
and it wasn't on the website that I ordered it from either. It was just the codes. So that's a shame. Maybe I'll have to Google it.
Maybe they can't be.
Yeah, lipstick sounds much better than F644 or FC44 or whatever it was.
Definitely easier to remember.
Yes, it is, isn't it?
Yeah. So, Morag, how are you getting on?
Hey, I just ready to do the stage that you're at.
Knitting the 2 edges together.
Yeah, but I used I didn't have another cable. I tried to get one for tonight and I couldn't manage, but so I've didn't have another short cable, the right size of needles. So I eventually decided that the crochet chain was what I preferred.
Right.
For my provisional cast on.
Yeah.
So I'll just have to work out how to get this, just how to pick up the stitches from that. But yeah, I'm using grey and mustard, and it's, yeah, I think it's worked out quite well. It looks quite nice. I'm just ready to do what you're doing.
Have you hold it up there for us to have a quick look?
How do I need to try and find how to get back to put my camera. Oh no, there we go. I'll hold it up. Where's the
higher? Oh yes. Oh, that's lovely. I really like those colors. Yeah.
So I bet I'll have to work out how to, I did the crochet thing.
Have you done that before? That provisional cast on, or is that the first time?
No, it's the first time, and I tried various different ways and decided that the crochet was easier for me, the way I preferred. So
I think there are 2 different ways of crocheting provisional cast on as well, but one of them you unzip it, as they call it.
Yeah, I think that's what I just did a chain.
Yeah, so you kind of knit into every stitch in the chain or every loop in the chain.
Yep.
And then just unzip the chain.
Yeah.
So
and I think I'll just use DPNs, seeing I failed to get an extra cable.
Have you got a cable of any size?
Yes, I have. I've got an 80.
Well, it doesn't matter what size it is. So
I don't have the right size of needle to go.
that matters either, because all you're doing is putting these stitches on them once so you can knit off them.
All right, okay. Oh, well, I'll try that. I'll do that.
What I'm doing, I'm actually knitting with the same circular needle that I've been knitting the whole thing with.
Yeah, I see
All
that.
in the back is doing is holding the stitches while I knit them off it.
All right, okay. Well, I'll try and see if I can get.
Another circular needle of any dimensions at all, so long as it's not massive and it will actually fit into the.
No, it's not huge. So that's fine. I'll give that a go.
I would recommend that, because I think with double pointed needles, this is already a fiddly enough exercise.
I'll go.
It'll be easier with circulars, I would say.
Right, I'll give that a go.
Okay, who's next?
Thank you.
Marianne with an I.
Aye. Well, I've joined the lining and the front together,
Great.
and I've no idea how to do the next bits, even although I looked it up on YouTube. It's just a bit too scary to do on my own.
That's fine. I'll show you how to do it in a second. I perhaps won't have a chance to knit all the way around this, but it doesn't matter because I've got another one I prepared earlier. And Mary, how about you? Have you started? You've knitted one already, haven't you?
I've got one done.
Mm-hmm.
Yep, that one. So
Oh,
but
nice.
that's my first time attempting the iCord, the cast off and then the iCord.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
it's not perfect, and it's got some humps and bumps,
Right.
but I'm okay with that. So I've started a second one.
Which will perhaps be even more beautiful.
Well, it might have more humps and bumps in it, who knows?
So this three. What I'm effectively doing here is a 3 needle bind off without the bind off. So I'm working with 3 needles. If you Google 3 needle bind off, you find a video of this, but basically it's the same as when you're casting off. You're knitting 2 stitches together, but then you're passing the previous stitch over it, so that you're your stitches are casting off while you're doing this. So if you wanted to join 2 edges together and just cast them off, if you just wanted to finish at that, then you could use this technique, but you could bind them off at the same time. However, we don't want to bind off because we want to keep those stitches to use for our iCord. Now, similarly with the iCord, you don't always do an iCord bind off. You might just want to do an iCord by itself. And I think at this point, is there anyone I haven't spoken to yet? I can't actually see everyone on my screen. Well, then I think that's everyone. So what I'll do is, if everyone's happy with this, knitting the 2 sides together, I'm going to set this to one side. I'll finish it later. And I'm going to start on the iCord. I've got just a couple of double pointed needles here, bamboo ones. They're actually a bit longer than they need to be. And I'm going to cast on with this nice fluffy, I think it's, what do you call that cheese? Wensleydale. Do you get Wensleydale sheep? It's something like that. It's very fluffy anyway. Can you see that?
Yeah.
Obviously, woolen spun. So I'm casting on, I'm going to cast on 5 stitches, and don't pay attention to the method I'm using to cast on because it's not important. But iCord is usually done with an odd number of stitches. Doesn't have to be, just happens to be. So there's my stitches cast on, 5 of them. For how many do we use for the headband? It's 3, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm going to do it with 5 just because it's easier to see 5 stitches than it is to see 3. So if I just wanted to knit an I-cord without the bind off, by far the easiest way is to do it on double pointed needles. Because what I'm doing is I'm knitting my stitches across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then I'm going to bring my yarn along the back of the stitches I've knitted, and I'm going to start knitting from the same side I started the last time. Now, if I've got a double pointed needle, all I need to do is slide those stitches to the far end, and I can start again. So instead of knitting backwards and forwards, you're always knitting from the same end. And you're bringing your yarn along the back of the stitches each time, sliding it to the end of the needle, so you're at the same end again. And this is like, what you end up with is like, remember when you were a kid and you used to knit on a spool with some nails in the top of it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's basically the same technique. So you're just knitting a tube by knitting. You can see my tube starting at the back there, can't you? This stitch where it's coming across is a bit loose, possibly because I'm just not pulling it tight enough. And I have used in patterns this technique of creating an I-cord or things like a drawstring, maybe in a garment. So I knitted, as a Christmas present, I knitted this lovely, it was like a snood or a cowl really, more like a cowl, but it had a turnover at the top with a drawstring through it, and the drawstring was knitted using I-cord. So you end up with a tube of yarn. You see that?
Mm-hmm.
And another time I've used this technique is actually in knitting the fingers for fingerless gloves.
Yeah.
Really clever pattern, I thought. So, you know, there's a hole right up the middle of this. You can see I'm just putting my needle up through it at the minute, but there's a gap up through the middle of it. And I think for the fingerless gloves, there was about 10 or 11 stitches in the I-cord. And of course, if you're bringing your yarn across the back of that many stitches, you do get quite, you know, a bigger gap here. But in that pattern, you just knitted this tube, and up that ladder of a gap at the back, you just pulled another another bit of yarn up it with a crochet hook, picking up each strand, and that filled in the tube and gave you an extra stitch at the top. So you had your fingers, and then you just joined them all together. I thought that was quite a clever pattern.
Mm-hmm.
And a clever use of I-cord. So that's what I-cord is. Now, of course, we are not knitting on, well, we are knitting on double pointed needles in a sense, but we can't keep moving our I-cord from one end to another because it's attached to something. And also we're wanting to bind off. So what we're effectively doing is we're knitting our I-cord, but we're joining it to the side of our garment. So every time we knit the I-cord, we're knitting one stitch from our I-cord together with one stitch from our garment and joining the two together. So I'm going to show you on another example here how to do that. But the first thing I'm going to show you, which is it's a bit sort of reverse here, but I wanted to show you it. So I haven't finished this off. So this is my previous. Sorry, this is the first side. Yeah. Well, you can see here, I've got a massive, big, long needle that I'm just.
Oh, yeah.
Put my I-cord here. It's far too long for my requirements, but it doesn't matter. So this is my finished I-cord, and I just wanted to show you how I sew it together at the end. I'm not actually sure I'm going to get this through this needle. I brought a very, very small needle here, but I'll give it my best shot. Okay, we're through. So hopefully you can see that. So I have 3 stitches, the last 3 stitches from my I-cord, and there's a wee bit of a rough edge always here where you start the I-cord. And I just go a little bit over the edge usually, and I pick up the first, the lowest stitch there, and then I take the needle back through the first stitch on the needle and pull it off. Tighten the two together. Then I pick up somewhere in the middle, not too far over, because you don't want to get one of these lumps that Marianne is talking about, but pick up somewhere in the middle of the left side and back and take your second stitch off, and then same again, up at the top, pick up from your left side and take it back through. And that is a fairly neat join there. Now, you're never going to get it absolutely perfect if you do it that way. I think it's as near as makes no difference. And so I continue to do it that way. However, if you wanted it to be absolutely perfect so that you couldn't see any join here at all, it just looked like your I-cord was seamless, what you can do is cast on the stitches, the 3 stitches for your I-cord provisionally in the same way that we did for the lining, and then graft them together using something like Kitchener's stitch to graft them together at the end. So that'll give you a beautiful, perfect finish. I can't be bothered with it personally. I'd prefer just to stitch them together. But you could do it that way. Cast them on provisionally, stick them on a safety pin so they're not, you know, getting too much in the way. One day I will try it. One day I'll have the patience to try it. And then just tie that in on the back. Give it a couple of stitches on the back. I mean, a man on a galloping horse isn't going to see that, is he?
Yeah. Looks good to me.
It's good.
Yeah, I had tried Googling it to finish it off, and the system that was there, they actually were using the stitches on the top rather than where you've gone down, you know, from the bottom of the I-cord closest to the actual work.
Mm-hmm.
How to explain? When you were picking the first loop from the beginning of your I-cord.
Yeah.
Yeah, you went down to the bottom loop, which is closest to the knitting.
Yeah.
What it showed on what I found on Google, it took it from the top. So I think that's why the bump happened. Instead of coming down to the bottom, you're at the top of the I-cord and finishing up on the top.
Yes, maybe.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So this time round, yeah.
The other thing I've seen done is, or seen in patterns where I-cord is joined, is knitting the last 3 stitches gradually together, so you end up with a single stitch.
Yeah, with a single stitch, yeah.
Tapering them off,
Yeah,
just sewing in that end stitch. But I've never had a very satisfactory result with that.
no.
But if you're a neater sewer than me, you might. But I'm happy enough with that finish. So that's the way I do it. And then just sew in the ends. I've still got the end of my lining to sew in there as well. So what I'm going to do now is, just before I show you the iCord, because you are going to have to do this as well, I'm going to show you how to pick up these bumps from the far end. And then we'll work the iCord bind off on those. So imagine you've done your iCord on your top edge, the one that you knitted together, and this is what you end up with. You've got one edge with an iCord, and you've got this edge, which is the join, where you join your lining wool and your normal wool. Now, you've got purl bumps, which make this really easy to pick up. That's why you do the purl row. But depending on which purl bumps you pick up, you get a different result. So if I pick up these alternating ones, that looks nice and clean, doesn't it?
Yep.
Mm-hmm.
If I pick up the ones in between, I'll do another couple.
Yeah.
You get these lines. Can you see them?
Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So make sure that you are picking up I would call them the lower purl bumps rather than the upper ones, not the ones that are on the edge or at the back of the edge, but the ones that are at the front of the edge, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you will get a much better finish without that irritating line. So you're picking up every other one or every other bump, which is every lower bump, but ignoring the upper ones. And I'm just going to go all the way around this, I think, because there aren't that many stitches on this one, because it's bigger wool. For Aran weight, for hats, for headbands, the norm is 96. It's a really good number, especially for ferrule, because you can divide it by lots of different numbers. So if you're doing charts, that gives you much more options in terms of the number of stitches in your ferrule chart. You can do a 6 or a 12 or let me think, what else can you divide 96 by? I suppose, yeah, I suppose 3, but 3 is yeah, there aren't many interesting charts. There are 3 stitches, but you could do 3 of a bigger chart. 3 32s. I'm going to 96. Right, here we are. So that's all my stitches picked up. I've got my cable needle on here, which is far too long, but it doesn't matter. Now, you'll have read in the pattern that we're going to use a cable cast on for the iCord. Wool, tension it round the needle, pull it out through behind the stitch and put it over the needle. Same again, in behind that new stitch. Make sure I get the right end. It's my knitting end, the end that's attached to the ball that I'm using. Pull it off and put it on the needle, and the same again. So that's what we call a cable cast on. So now I have my extra 3 stitches to use for my iCord, my 3-stitch iCord. Now the iCord is a bit more time consuming, the iCord bind off, because we can't keep sliding it backwards and forwards on our needle. We have to keep physically putting it backwards and forwards between the 2 needles. So I knit my 3 stitches. First 2, a bit tangled up. And I'm just going to go into the back of the first one because it's easier. One, 2, and then the last stitch of my new stitches, my iCord stitches, I'm going to knit it through the back together with the first stitch of the headband.
Okay.
I've got 2 stitches knitting together there through the back, leaving my 3 iCord stitches on this right hand needle. But then, because I have to knit these again, I need to transfer them back onto my left needle. And then I knit them again. 1, 2, and the third one gets knitted through the back with the first stitch of the headband. So each time I'm transferring them back from the right to the left needle, and I'm knitting them again. And that has the same effect as sliding them along the double pointed needle did, as I showed you earlier. And you can see that little tube there starting to form, but it's forming along the line of the headband. So each of the stitches along this edge will get knitted 3 times. So that means it takes you 3 times as long to cast it off, I'm afraid, as it would if you were just casting it off normally. You've got to go through all 132 stitches 3 times. Remembering always to put the third one through the back with its neighbour. Sorry, does somebody have a question there?
Yeah, it just makes a nicer finish though, doesn't it?
Oh, it does.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, some headbands have I've seen some with quite a nice rib edge on them, but I just think the iCord is, as you say, it's nicer, it's neater, it's a bit more professional looking.
Mm-hmm.
And I just think it's really attractive as well.
Yeah.
Because it's running in the opposite direction, it really adds interest to it. So do you think you could give that a go now, Marianne?
Yes, definitely. I think when you're not used to knitting, reading a pattern, the language is, you got to try and interpret what it means as well.
Yeah, it can be. And I think that's why these videos on YouTube are quite useful as well.
Yeah.
Sometimes you just need to see something being done.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you understand it. Had you done, or had any of you other ladies done iCord before you did this pattern?
Yes, but not on an edge, just as the cord.
Not as an edge either, just as a cord. That's a new skill.
That's great. So
Or
everybody,
at least it's a new technique I've been taught. Whether I've got a new skill or not is yet to be seen.
Yes.
So yeah, so that's coming along nicely. And I think really that's all I have to show you. But I think for me, you know, when I knit a new pattern, one of the nice things is when I do learn a new skill, and that's, I suppose, that's why I keep knitting, not because I like doing the same thing all the time, but because I like the challenge of learning to do something new. So knitting with two colors, using new techniques like this. One of these days I'll try the crochet provisional cast on and see how I get on with that. One of these days I might actually try and learn to crochet as well. But for now, I'm going to stick with knitting a few more headbands because they are selling quite well in the shop. If any of you decide that you would quite like to sell some, that would be great because it would take the pressure off me a bit.
If my knitting ever became good enough,
It was good
quality
enough.
to sell, I would.
Well, that's something to aim for.
Yeah.
So I think I'm just going to sign off by showing you my next colors. I've got a nice, this is lovely. I haven't knitted with this yet before, but let me see. It's Sirdar Snuggly, 100% merino.
Lovely.
And it just looks beautiful. It's such a nicely defined wool, you know. It looks like something that would be lovely for cabling as well, but it's really, really soft. And then my headband colors are, this one's called Spice, and it's a lovely sort of, it's like a light madder almost, slightly rusty red, but quite a pale red, and a nice kind of flecked blue. I don't know if you can see properly, but that blue has got the same fleck of the red through it.
Nice.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, I think they're going to be nice. I'm slightly concerned that there isn't quite enough contrast between them. When I twist them together, it does kind of look like there is a.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, nice.
Yeah.
I think this should.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nice.
So that's my,
Karen, can I ask you another question? Block work and dry flat. What does that mean?
right. Block. When you're knitting with two colors or more in Fair Isle, or really when you're knitting with wool at all, to even things out when you finish knitting, you know, every stitch isn't exactly the same tension. So to even out the tension in your work, you block it, which is basically just a very light wash really, except you don't create any friction, because when wool is wet, if you rub it, it felts.
Right.
So what you do is you pour a basin of tepid water, not too hot, not too cold. Put fairy liquid, not much, a few drops of fairy liquid or shampoo I normally use, and just make a bit of a lather, and then dunk your headband or whatever garment into it. Make sure it's under the washer, push it down a bit so the air bubbles come out and it goes under the washer. The detergent, you use the detergent really to create a film on the top of the water so that your garment will stay underneath the water.
Okay.
And you leave it for not very long, 20 minutes or so. Take it out, wring it gently because you don't want to be rubbing it whenever it is wet. So really I just kind of squeeze it a bit in my hands to get the most of the water out. And then I will put a towel on a surface. I lay the work flat on the towel and I'll roll the two up together. And I just kind of press the towel. I go along it like this usually, like a massage kind of, just hit it a little bit so that the water gets absorbed into the towel,
Yeah.
but don't wring it. And when you take out your headband, it should be a lot drier. And then either dry it flat, or preferably, if you've got anything that you can use as a head shape,
Yeah. Mhm.
put it
Or a
on that.
balloon or something you said before.
Balloon or a bowl or anything that's just the right size. So the
Yeah.
size and the pattern, I think, is 21 to 23 inches, which is the size of the average head. So something that has a circumference of 22 inches approximately will be perfect.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much.
If you ever shrink a woolen garment, you can usually unshrink it by using a similar technique. So if you soak it in water with hair conditioner in it,
Wow.
that will loosen up the fibers.
Mhm.
And then you can do the same thing, stretch it to the dimensions that you want and dry it at those dimensions.
Wow, that's handy.
Yeah, yeah, it doesn't always work,
Mhm.
but if it's not too badly shrunk, it should work. If you were blocking a flat garment, a jumper, or something that you actually get things called jumper boards, which are used for blocking feral knitting. So they're like a sort of, not quite a wicker man, but they're a
Yeah.
wood
Mhm.
that you can stretch your knitting on to exactly the right dimensions.
Right.
You can do something similar just by laying out a towel flat and pinning your garment on it to the right dimensions, so that when it dries out, it'll be the right size.
Mhm. Perfect. Thank you very much.
Super.
Yeah.
Super. Thank you.
So if there's no other questions? No?
No,
Ladies, thank you so much for being here every week. It's been great fun for me too, and really lovely to see your creations. It's just I love knitting, the traditional knitting, and I love the fact that these patterns are still being used, and I really do get a kick out of seeing other people knitting this pattern now, and I hope it will stay alive, and we can keep that local traditional pattern going. So thanks for your interest, and if you do have any other questions, or you'd like to show us, Marianne, when you finish your
Bring it in.
Yeah, I'll bring it in.
and put a picture on the Facebook.
Yeah.
Keep in touch through the group. And Marianne, when you're in the area, come and visit us. Okay, well, have a great
Okay
week.
then.
thank you so much.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Cheers.
bye.